Poor mechanic helps a girl chained in the rain, unaware she's a billionaire heiress. The rain poured hard over the Pittsburgh skyline, drumming violently against the metal rooftops of the industrial district like nature's own warning. It was past midnight and the streets were quiet. Too quiet. Jake, a 29-year-old mechanic whose hands had known nothing but engine grease and hard days, locked up his garage for the night, his denim jacket soaked at the shoulders. He flicked off the lights inside and turned to leave, the dull neon sign outside casting an eerie red hue onto the wet pavement. Just as he stepped into the alleyway beside the building, a faint, broken sound reached his ears. "Help!" Jake froze. He listened again. "Please, someone." His heartbeat quickened as he followed the sound, moving cautiously past a dumpster and around the back of the garage. Then he saw her. A girl, no older than mid-20s, was chained to the iron fence bordering the old warehouse lot. Her clothes were soaked through, hair plastered to her face, and her body shivering violently. A thick iron chain was wrapped around her waist and padlocked to the bars behind her. She looked like something out of a nightmare, one that had been going on far too long. Jake stepped forward, cautious. "Who the hell did this to you?" Her voice trembled. "I don't know who you are, but please, if you don't unlock me, I will die here." Jake looked around. The alley was empty, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. "What's going on? Who are you? Why are you chained like this?" She coughed, then cried softly. "They left me here. I escaped, but they found me again. Please." "I don't have much time." Jake didn't ask any more questions. He reached into his tool bag and pulled out a crowbar and a set of pliers. His hands worked fast, eyes flicking between the padlock and her pale face. The chain clanked to the ground. She slumped forward into his arms. Her whole body was ice. "I got you," he muttered, half to her, half to himself. He carried her back to the garage, kicking the door shut behind them and setting her gently on an old padded bench near the heater. He grabbed the cleanest towel he had and began drying her off, his rough hands strangely gentle. "I don't even know your name," he said quietly. She looked at him with wide, exhausted eyes. "You don't want to know. If you know, they'll come for you too." Jake blinked. "Lady, you showed up chained in the rain? They already made it my problem." She gave a faint smile, then coughed again. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and pushed a mug of lukewarm coffee into her shaking hands. She took a sip, then clutched the cup close like it was life itself. The room fell silent except for the patter of rain on the tin roof. Jake sat across from her, watching the rise and fall of her breathing. She wouldn't say her name. She wouldn't say who they were. But there was something in the way her hand clung to his that unsettled him. A quiet desperation, like he was the first person in a long time who hadn't wanted something from her. And that touched something deep inside him. He watched as her eyes finally began to close. She slumped slightly forward, asleep, sitting up. He reached to steady her, and her hand found his again, this time with less fear, more instinct. For a moment, the only sound in the garage was the quiet hum of the heater and the soft rhythm of her breath. He looked down at their hands, his stained with years of labor, hers bruised and trembling. He exhaled slowly. "Whatever this is," he whispered, "you're safe now. I don't know what I just walked into, but I swear to God, I won't let it take you." Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the quiet walls of the mechanic's garage, something had begun. A connection. A promise. A beginning neither of them could have predicted. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by morning, gray light filtering through the dusty garage windows. Jake stood by the counter, pouring steaming water into a chipped mug, the faint aroma of tea barely masking the scent of oil and grease that clung to every corner of the shop. On the old workbench where he had laid her the night before, Sarah stirred. She blinked against the dim light, body stiff from cold and exhaustion. For a moment she looked around, dazed, as if unsure where she was. Jake walked over, holding out the mug with a folded towel in his other hand. "It's hot. Careful." She sat up slowly, her shoulders tense beneath the oversized hoodie he had found for her. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the cup. "Thanks," she whispered, voice still raw. He didn't say anything at first, just sat across from her, watching her with cautious concern. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharper now, like someone used to hiding fear under layers of control. Jake finally broke the silence. "We should call the cops." The reaction was instant. Sarah jerked upright, the mug nearly slipping from her hands. "No," she said, voice tight, almost pleading. "No police." Jake frowned. "Listen, I don't know what's going on, but you don't understand." She cut him off, eyes wide with panic. "If I go to the police, they'll find me, they'll kill me before I even get to speak." Jake stared at her. "What are you talking about? Who's after you?" She looked down, gripping the mug tightly, as if it were her last anchor. The hoodie slipped slightly from her neck, revealing deep, dark bruises just beneath her collarbone. Jake's breath caught. He pointed gently. "That from last night?" She didn't answer, just pulled the fabric back up with trembling fingers. Jake leaned forward, his voice softer now. "Who did this to you?" She swallowed hard. "I can't tell you everything, not yet, but there are people, powerful people. If they know I'm alive, everything I'm trying to protect, it's over." Jake leaned back, arms crossed. "Then what the hell am I supposed to do here?" Sarah met his gaze. For the first time, there was a flicker of vulnerability in her voice. "I'm not asking you to fix it. I need somewhere to hide, just for a little while, somewhere I can think." Jake hesitated. He had seen all kinds of broken people pass through this part of town. Junkies, runaways, lost souls. But there was something different about her. Something sharp, like she had been whole once, powerful even, and now she was fighting like hell to survive. He stood, grabbed a spare blanket from the back shelf and tossed it to her. "You can stay. For now." Sarah looked at him, surprised. "Why are you helping me?" Jake shrugged, heading for the toolbox. "You looked like someone who needed help. That's enough for me." She lowered her eyes, and for a brief moment, something in her posture softened. As Jake returned to work on a busted alternator across the room, he couldn't help but glance back at her now and then. She sat curled up on the bench, sipping tea, her eyes constantly scanning the shadows, the windows, the exits, always alert, always bracing for the next threat. Whoever she was, whatever she was hiding, it was clear this woman was running from something far bigger than either of them. And Jake, for reasons he couldn't quite explain, was no longer willing to let her run alone. The neon lights of the gas station flickered under the gray Pittsburgh sky. Jake wiped the sweat from his brow, the scent of gasoline clinging to his clothes. He had just stepped out to grab a gallon of oil when the voice caught his attention, low, urgent, coming from behind the side wall near the ice machine. "She's still out there, the Sterling girl. I do not care how, find her. Finish it before anyone hears a word." Jake froze. He inched closer, hiding behind a vending machine, heart pounding. The man on the phone wore a black trench coat, speaking quickly into a burner phone. "No," she escaped. "I don't know how, just handle it. No witnesses." Then he vanished into the misty street. Jake stood there a moment longer, his gut twisting. Sterling, that name, it sounded familiar. He drove back to the garage in silence, the words echoing in his head. When he walked in, Sarah was sitting on the old couch, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. She looked up, eyes filled with quiet dread. Jake shut the door behind him and locked it. Then he turned to her. "Who are you? Really?" Sarah stiffened. "I was at the gas station," Jake said. "I overheard something. A man on the phone, he called you the Sterling girl. Said you escaped, said they have to finish it before anyone hears a word." Color drained from her face. Jake stepped closer. "If I'm going to protect you, I need to know the truth. All of it." Sarah's hands trembled in her lap. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "My name is Sarah Sterling," Jake blinked. "As in Sterling Energy?" She nodded. "I'm the last Sterling." There was a heavy silence. Sarah drew a shaky breath. "My parents died in a plane crash last year. It was ruled an accident, but I don't think it was." Jake didn't move. My brother, Victor, he took over after they died. The board let him run the company. I was still grieving, still figuring things out. But I started seeing things. In the numbers, transfers, missing funds. Jake sat down across from her, listening without a word. I confronted him 2 weeks ago, Sarah continued, voice barely a whisper. I told him I had the records. I told him I was going to the board. 2 nights later, someone broke into my apartment. I was drugged, woke up chained to a fence in the middle of nowhere. Her hands tightened around the blanket. I was supposed to die in that storm, and no one would have questioned it. Just another runaway, another girl who disappeared in the night. Jake swallowed hard. And now? He asked. Do you still have the records? Sarah nodded. I had them backed up, on a USB drive. I hid it. Somewhere no one would think to look. But I can't get to it alone. They're watching. They know I'm alive now. Jake leaned forward, his jaw tight. You're telling me your own brother tried to have you killed? She met his gaze, tears threatening behind the strength in her eyes. Yes, because I'm the only person left who can stop him. A long silence stretched between them. Jake stood and walked over to the window, looking out at the rain-slick street. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he turned back. You should have died that night, he said quietly. Sarah looked away. But you didn't, Jake continued. And maybe that means something. She turned her face toward him again. You're not alone anymore, he said. I'm in this, whatever it takes. Sarah's breath caught as the weight of his words sank in. She had been alone, in the dark, for so long. No one to trust, nowhere to run. And now, here was someone who knew the truth and still chose to stay. Her hand reached out slowly, almost involuntarily, and Jake took it without hesitation. In that small gesture, in the dim light of the garage, something shifted. Jake knew what he was stepping into, a war of power and money and blood. But looking into Sarah's eyes, he also knew this. He was not going to let her fight it alone. Rain fell like needles from the sky as Jake and Sarah stood at the edge of the alley, staring at the rusted fence that led toward the old warehouse district. Jake had one hand on the wrench tucked into his belt, the only weapon he could carry without drawing too much attention. Sarah clutched a folded paper map in her trembling hands, the ink beginning to blur from the damp air. Her other hand remained pressed to the inside of her coat, as if guarding her heart. The USB is hidden under the old supply shelves, far corner of the warehouse. I left it there before they found me, Sarah whispered, her eyes scanning the darkness like a hunted animal. Jake nodded, his jaw clenched. Let's move fast, in and out, quiet. They slipped through the alley, stepping over puddles and broken crates, their footsteps lost beneath the sound of the storm. The warehouse loomed ahead like a sleeping giant, its corrugated metal skin peeling in layers, windows shattered, graffiti scrawled across its rusted bones. Jake reached out, pushed the side door open slowly. The hinges moaned like a warning. Inside, darkness swallowed them. Their breath clouded in the cold air as they crept across the dusty floor, every footstep an echo. Sarah pointed to the far wall. Over there, behind that row of crates. But just as they reached the halfway point, the silence shattered, a heavy crunch of glass behind them. Jake whirled around, instincts flaring. Down! He shoved Sarah to the floor as the first bullet screamed through the air, striking the concrete wall where she had just been standing. Another shot tore past Jake's head. He ducked low, spotted a masked figure emerging from the shadows, pistol raised. Without hesitation, Jake lunged, swinging the heavy wrench with all his might. It connected with a sickening crack and the man dropped. Sarah scrambled toward cover behind a rusted steel beam, her breath ragged. 2 more figures appeared from the far side of the warehouse, guns drawn, shouting orders into the chaos. They found us, she cried, voice cracking with panic. Jake grabbed her hand, yanking her up. Run! They sprinted, weaving through rusted machinery, ducking beneath hanging chains and broken scaffolding. The attackers were right behind them, footsteps pounding against the soaked concrete floor, gunfire lighting up the darkness. Jake spotted a door ahead and pushed it open with his shoulder. This way! They burst out into the open night, landing on a gravel path flanked by old train tracks. Fog rolled low over the rails, twisting through the air like ghosts. Sarah stumbled, her foot catching on a loose board, but Jake caught her before she fell. A gunshot rang out. Jake grunted, a flash of red blooming across his upper arm. He clenched his teeth, staggered but did not stop. "Jake!" Sarah screamed, seeing the blood soaking through his sleeve. "I'm fine," he gasped. "Keep moving." They found cover in an old maintenance tunnel near the tracks, ducking beneath the half-collapsed entrance, surrounded by darkness and dripping rain. Jake leaned against the cold concrete wall and slid down, breath shallow. Sarah knelt beside him, frantically pulling up his sleeve, her fingers trembling. "You're bleeding. God, Jake, this is bad." He gave her a crooked smile, eyes glazed with pain. "Just a scratch. You need a hospital." No hospital, no cops. We're not done yet." Sarah looked at him, tears in her eyes. "You're risking everything for me." He touched her hand, his voice quiet but firm. "We need that USB. We end this tonight." She nodded slowly, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. I didn't think anyone would do this for me. I didn't think I mattered that much." Jake stared at her, the rain running down his face. "You matter to me." She froze. The words hit her like lightning. "If you're scared," she whispered, "you can go. I won't ask you to stay." "I'm scared," Jake admitted, his voice low and steady. "But not for me. I'm scared of what'll happen if they take you again. I'm scared of what they'll do to you. I'm scared they'll silence you forever." He took her hand in his, blood-streaked and shaking. "I'd rather die than let that happen." Sarah's defenses crumbled. The tears spilled over as she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. "No one's ever stayed," she whispered. "No one's ever fought for me." Jake closed his eyes. "Then let me be the first." They sat there in the dark, hearts beating fast and uncertain, but aligned for the first time. Outside, the rain fell like grief. Inside, it felt like hope. Sarah wiped her cheeks. Her voice, though soft, was resolute. "We get that drive," she said, "and then we bring him down." Jake nodded. "Together." And together they rose, into the storm once more. The warehouse was silent, save for the faint hum of the USB drive plugged into Jake's dusty laptop. The screen glowed in the dim light, revealing a cascade of documents, bank transfers, encrypted emails, offshore accounts. Line after line confirmed what Sarah had feared all along. Jake sat motionless, jaw tight, eyes scanning the screen as the data unfolded like a confession. "It's all here," he said quietly, barely above a whisper. "He moved millions. Months before your parents' plane went down." Sarah stood behind him, arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold her own body together. Her gaze fixed on the screen, unmoving, but her chest rose and fell in shallow, deliberate breaths. "How he did it," she said, voice shaking. "He planned everything. My God, he didn't even wait long after they were gone. He knew exactly what he was doing." Jake turned in his chair, his face lit by the cold blue light of the monitor. "Sarah? This isn't just fraud. This is premeditated, coordinated. This is a kill switch for anyone who tries to expose him." He gestured toward the files. "If you go public, he'll come at you with everything he has, lawyers, media, maybe even worse." "I know," she whispered. He stood slowly, facing her fully now. "Then what are we doing? We could hand this off to someone else, go to a reporter, have them break the story, stay in the shadows." Sarah's eyes flickered toward the flash drive on the table like it was a grenade waiting to explode. She moved toward it, her boots thudding softly on the concrete. She didn't touch it. She only stared. "If I hand this off," she said quietly, "I disappear again. I hide. That's what he wants. That's how he wins." Jake was silent. He could feel the storm in her, rising just beneath the surface. "I'm not afraid of him anymore," she continued. "Not the way I used to be." Jake's eyes never left her. "Then what are you afraid of?" Sarah lifted her head, and for the first time in hours, maybe days, he saw something different. The fire in her eyes was still there, but behind it, something fragile shimmered. "I'm afraid of losing you." The words fell into the room like a dropped stone. Jake blinked, caught off guard. "I've never had anyone stand between me and danger before," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Never had anyone put themselves in harm's way for me. You did that. Not once. Not because you had to, but because you chose to. And now I'm scared. Because you've become the one thing I don't want to lose." Her voice cracked and she turned away. "Victor already took everything. My parents, my home, my name. If I lose you too?" Jake didn't wait. He crossed the space between them in 2 long strides and took her face in his hands, gently turning her toward him. "You won't," he said. "You can't promise that," she replied, pain sharp in her voice. "You don't know what's coming." "No," Jake said, "but I know this. I've fought too long to keep people out. I never thought I'd find someone like you, Sarah. You walked into my life, broken and burning, and you didn't ask for help, you gave it. You made me believe again, in something real, something worth protecting." Her tears slid down her cheeks, silent and unashamed. "So don't stay alive for him, or the company, or some idea of justice," Jake said, voice steady. "Stay alive. For us. For the chance that there might be more than just running and fighting and fear." Sarah leaned into his touch, her hands covering his. She closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against his. They stood there for a long time, saying nothing, letting their bodies speak in ways their mouths could not. And then, slowly, they kissed, not in desperation, but in truth, in all the quiet, aching emotion that had built between them. Later, they lay on the small cot tucked behind an old workbench in the garage's back room. The worn blanket barely covered them, but neither of them noticed. Sarah's head rested on Jake's chest, his heartbeat a steady rhythm beneath her ear. "Promise me something," she murmured. "Anything," he said, fingers tangled in her damp hair. "When this is over, when Victor's gone, don't disappear. Don't go back to being the guy who doesn't let anyone in." Jake chuckled softly. "You're stuck with me now, Sarah Sterling." A tear slid from the corner of her eye, but it wasn't from sadness. In that moment, she wasn't a billionaire's daughter or the last heir of an empire. She wasn't the hunted girl in the rain or the target of a powerful man's ambition. She was just a woman, brave, terrified, deeply loved. And Jake, the poor mechanic with calloused hands and a battered past, no longer felt like a man fixing broken things. He had found something worth building. They held each other tightly, not out of fear, but because they knew the next morning might bring war. But tonight, they had each other. And sometimes that was enough. Jake sat in the dim back room of a friend's computer repair shop, the glow of 3 monitors casting his face in pale blue light. The hum of machines surrounded him, blending with the faint buzz of fluorescent bulbs overhead. Sarah sat beside him on a worn metal stool, her knees drawn up slightly, arms folded tight across her chest. She had barely spoken since they arrived, her gaze fixed on the lines of code scrolling across the center screen, watching email logs and banking records upload to a secure cloud. The room smelled like dust, solder, old plastic, and the lingering tension of decision. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked, glancing sideways at her. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating just a second longer. Sarah nodded slowly. "We either do this, or we keep running," she said, her voice firm but quiet. "And I'm done running." Jake exhaled, the breath long and full of weight. He clicked send. With a single keystroke, the files shot off into cyberspace. Copies routed through encrypted tunnels to a trusted investigative journalist. Another to a contact Jake had once helped during his mechanic days, who now worked for the FBI. Additional backups were rigged to release at timed intervals, scattered across multiple locations in case anyone tried to bury the truth. "It's done," he said quietly, leaning back in the chair, the silence between them now heavier than ever. They exchanged a long look. Not a look of victory, something deeper, a quiet, shared understanding of what they had just risked, what might come next, the look of two people who had stepped off a cliff and were still mid-air. Jake stood and stretched his aching shoulders. "We'll need to leave town by morning, before Victor realizes what's happening." Sarah hesitated, then she reached into her jacket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper, creased, worn at the edges. "What's that?" Jake asked. "My last message to Victor," she replied. Her eyes didn't lift from the paper. A goodbye, a warning, a confession, maybe something he'll read before they take him away. Jake looked at her, admiration flickering beneath his cautious expression. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I have to," she said. "He's my brother. I want him to know I'm not afraid of him anymore, that I'm not hiding." That night, they stayed in a rundown motel on the edge of the city. The neon vacancy sign flickered through the blinds like a slow heartbeat. Inside, the air smelled faintly of mildew and old carpet cleaner. Sarah sat at the motel desk, a pen in her hand, her eyes locked on the page before her. She wrote with measured precision, each letter sharp and deliberate. She told Victor she knew the truth, that the lies had run dry, that the blood on his hands, of their parents, of her stolen freedom, would no longer be hidden. She reminded him of the stories their mother used to read to them, how he once held her hand when she was afraid of the dark. She wrote that the little sister who once loved him had died the moment he sold her trust for power, and then she ended with a single sentence, her pen pausing just before writing it. "I hope you find whatever's left of your soul before it's too late." She folded the letter, slipped it into a plain envelope, and the next morning left it in the mailbox outside Victor's gleaming downtown office tower. Then they waited, and the city erupted. By midday, the headlines were everywhere. Sterling empire rocked by scandal, billionaire heir under criminal investigation, whistleblower evidence exposes embezzlement and fraud. Then came the video footage, grainy cell phone clips, leaked newsreels, of Victor being escorted out of his own boardroom in handcuffs. His face was pale, lips pressed into a tight line, his eyes a mix of fury and disbelief as flashbulbs burst around him. His tailored suit was immaculate, but something inside him had already unraveled. Sarah watched the news from the edge of the motel bed, her legs curled beneath her, the motel blanket draped over her lap like a fragile shield. Jake sat beside her, silent, absorbing the moment. He reached over and took her hand in his. "You did it," he said softly. Sarah did not smile. She barely blinked. "I thought I'd feel free," she whispered, "but all I feel is empty." Jake pulled her closer, wrapping his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "That's what grief feels like," he murmured. "It's not justice that hurts. It's the loss of what you hoped he'd be." Her voice cracked. "He was my family." Jake kissed the crown of her head gently. "Now you get to choose your family." Outside, the world moved on. Cars passed, voices drifted from nearby rooms, but inside that small motel room, it was still, a breath held in the quiet after the storm. On the television, Victor's eyes met the camera just before he ducked into the black car waiting outside the courthouse. He disappeared behind the tinted glass. Sarah did not look away. Jake laced his fingers through hers, and she held on, tighter than ever. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. A month had passed since Victor was arrested. The media frenzy had begun to die down. The cameras no longer parked outside Sarah's old penthouse, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she could breathe. She had officially stepped down from the Sterling board, submitted a signed statement to the press. "I renounce all claims to the Sterling fortune and its holdings. My only wealth is the freedom to do good," and she meant it. Instead of boardrooms and bodyguards, Sarah now walked through the doors of a small brick building nestled on the edge of a working-class neighborhood in Pittsburgh. The sign above read, "Second Start Community Center." Inside, Jake was finishing up his mechanic's workshop with 3 teenage boys, their hands black with grease and their laughter echoing through the hall. He looked up as Sarah entered, his eyes lighting up like they did every single time. Sarah smiled and headed to the next room, where she offered legal advice and guidance to women escaping domestic abuse and wrongful evictions. She had seen the worst of what power could do, and now she used her knowledge to protect the powerless. One afternoon, as Sarah was organizing intake forms, a girl no older than 12 shyly approached. She had big brown eyes, a too thin frame, and a backpack that looked heavier than her body. "Miss Sarah?" the girl whispered. Sarah knelt beside her. "Hey, sweetheart, what's your name?" "Kaylee," the girl said, voice trembling. "I just wanted to say thank you." Sarah frowned gently. "For what?" Kaylee pulled a wrinkled flyer from her pocket. "My mom, she saw this. She said we had to run. We came here. They helped her find a shelter. And she said it was because of you." Sarah blinked back sudden tears. Kaylee continued quietly. "You're not a princess or anything, but my mom says you saved our lives." Sarah knelt there, stunned, her heart cracking open in a way she had not expected. She pulled Kaylee into a gentle hug, holding the little girl like she was made of glass and strength all at once. "I'm not a princess, Kaylee," Sarah whispered, "but I promise you, you're safe now." That evening, Sarah stepped outside as the sun began to set, casting golden light across the rooftop garden they were growing for the center. Jake stood there, wiping his hands on a rag, his face tired but content. "Busy day?" he asked. "Best one yet," she replied. Jake smiled. "You sure you're okay with all this? No boardrooms? No chauffeurs?"
"No empire."
Sarah looked out over the street, where kids rode bikes and a mural was being painted by volunteers. She slipped her hand into his. "I spent my whole life being told who I was supposed to be," she said. "Now, I get to decide, and I choose this." She turned to face him fully, her voice softer. "I choose you. You're where I begin again. Not Sterling, not the past, you." Jake didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms and held her as the lights of Pittsburgh began to flicker on, not with cameras or headlines, but with real life. And Sarah, for the first time in years, didn't feel like she was running from anything. She felt home. The wind off the Monongahela was soft that evening, warm enough to chase away the chill, but gentle enough to let the silence linger between them. Jake and Sarah stood on the old steel bridge just outside the city, the water below catching every last streak of golden light from the setting sun. The sky above Pittsburgh was painted in shades of rose and amber, fading slowly into twilight. In the distance, the city lights began to flicker to life, not far, but far enough. Jake leaned his forearms on the railing, eyes watching the water drift past. Beside him, Sarah let the wind pull through her loose curls, her coat unbuttoned, her breath steady. The garage was behind them now. Once a dusty, forgotten space, it had become a safe haven, not just for engines, but for hearts. A community center built from grease-stained dreams and pieces of a past they no longer had to outrun. They had started with nothing, and somehow, that was everything. "I used to think I was just broken," Jake said, breaking the silence. "A busted-up mechanic in a world that didn't need me. Just fixing things because I couldn't fix myself." Sarah turned to him slowly, her eyes shining in the soft light. "But then you showed up," he continued, his voice low, soaking wet, chained, lost, "and somehow you saw something in me no one ever had." She stepped closer, laying her palm gently against his chest. "You were never broken, Jake. You were just waiting for the right engine to restart." He chuckled softly, his hand covering hers. "And you," he said, "you were supposed to be unreachable. $1 billion Sarah Sterling. But the truth is, you're more real than anyone I've ever met." Sarah looked up at him, tears forming but not falling. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with truth. "You're the first person who looked at me and didn't see a last name or a fortune. You saw me, and you stayed." "I'll always stay," he whispered. The words weren't grand, they weren't dressed in diamonds or backed by orchestras, but they were the kind that carved themselves into the bones. They leaned in, and under the warm dusk of a city that once tried to swallow them both, They kissed. No longer out of fear or desperation, but out of choice, out of love. As the last rays of sun dipped below the skyline, the world around them stilled. There were no reporters, no boardrooms, no betrayals or billion-dollar deals. Just two people who had found each other in the rain and decided to hold on, not for what they had, but for who they had become. And in that moment, wrapped in the light of something that felt like peace, Jake whispered against her lips, "We don't need much, Sarah. Just this. Just us." She smiled, nodding as her forehead rested against his. "Just us," she echoed. And behind them the river flowed on, steady, strong, like the love that had risen from the storm. If this story stirred something deep inside you, if it reminded you that even in the darkest rain, love can still be found and that redemption is possible when two hearts choose each other against all odds, then you're in the right place. At Soul Stirring Stories, we bring you powerful tales of resilience, sacrifice, and the kind of love that heals wounds and rewrites destinies. Let us know in the comments which part touched you the most. And if you believe in the magic of second chances, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another story that speaks straight to the soul. Until next time, keep believing in love, in hope, and in the beauty of a heart that dares to care. This is Soul Stirring Stories, where every story is a journey home.